When we look at a city skyline, we see towers and glass and progress. But to birds, all that bright, shiny architecture can be fatal. Birds can't see glass. They see only reflections of trees and sky. And that often means collisions. In fact, as many as 1 billion birds are killed this way every year in North America, far more than in oil spills or natural disasters. Which is why a Toronto man is on a rescue mission. And he's having a worldwide impact. Jackson Prosco has the story.
The day begins early at this home in Uxbridge, Ontario. Michael Mesure's clock is set to migration time. Birds are flying south, and a radar map tells Michael there's heavy traffic over Lake Ontario. So he gathers his tools and sets off to work. It's the start of another long day for Toronto's birdman. It's daybreak in the heart of the city, canyons of steel and glass. And Michael takes us along as he looks for the dead and the wounded in the kill zone, downtown Toronto.
Hard to see him, but I think that's a Tennessee warbler. It has some eye damage there. Toronto sits in one of the busiest migratory corridors on the planet. Its proximity to the lakefront, its abundance in ravines and woodlots. It's a very green city in the way of its foliage. Toronto sits right in the hub of all that activity, creating all this form of modern architecture that is most lethal to birds.
So Toronto's kind of like a wall in the middle of their migratory path.
Definitely.
The trouble is, that wall in the middle of the migratory path is invisible to birds.
Well, if you look closely, you'll see that the tree on the right-hand side here is being reflected in the glass. They just see that as another tree to fly to. Unbeknownst to them, they end up colliding with these solid surfaces, sustaining a variety of different injuries.
So it's a nice space for us, not so much for the birds.
That's right.
The traps are everywhere. For birds, a fatal haul of mirrors. At least 1 million birds are killed by glass in Toronto every year. So 20 years ago, Michael founded a non-profit group called FLAP. Volunteers collect the dead birds and bring them here to a deep freeze that fills up several times a year.
A pair of brown thrashers, you can see the blood, and they're big birds. So when they hit, they have a huge impact.
Paloma Plant is one of the volunteers. Her job is to tag and catalog every bird with the species, cause of death, and where it was found. She knows all their stories and uses them to lobby for a bird-safe city.
Another woodcock, a couple of mourning doves. There's a female, and there's a male. But you can see just the amount of damage to the face and the beak. It's completely broken, smashed. Hopefully it died instantly.
There are the dead, but there are also survivors, and they get careful attention. Like this Virginia rail. Paloma looks for signs of damage.
This bird is in great shape. Feathering is good, he's not missing any feathers.
He'll be released later that day. He'll fly again, but more than half the birds hitting windows won't. It's a carnage most of us never witness.
The gull just got a bird. See that?
We found out why on our morning patrol with Michael.
The Well, that's why people don't see this. The gulls get to the birds before anyone sees them, or they know exactly what to look for. And so this is why, you know, we need our volunteers down here when the events happen, because they're gone.
The gulls are the cleanup crew. They far outnumber the human rescuers, and they're quicker. As a result, Michael and his team recover only a small fraction of the dead, a total of 60,000 over the years, out of the millions killed. Scavengers get the rest. 7:15 a.m., and Michael meets volunteer Lori Nichols. She's found a survivor.
Okay, so there's a white-throated sparrow. So he looks a little more lively. His eyes are open, but he is having some difficulty breathing. I'll go ahead and spray him with some more arnica.
Arnica is an herbal remedy for bruises.
And then put him back in and let him rest.
Lori uses it to help the bird's recovery. Michael has been doing these morning missions every spring and fall now for 23 years. The birds called Michael to his rescue mission on a morning when they simply fell from the sky. It was May 16th, 1990. There was heavy fog in downtown Toronto at the height of spring migration. Michael found himself in a killing field.
There were hundreds of birds all over the sidewalk. A combination of dead and dying. They were dropping all around me. Amongst the many birds I picked up that morning, I was driving up the Don Valley to release these birds, and one of them escaped from one of the bags that they were in. And usually they fly around inside your car, but this one flew and perched itself on my rearview mirror. And it started to sing. I don't know how I didn't drive right off that highway. I was fixated on this bird for about 10 seconds. It dropped dead in my lap. And it's just stuck with me ever since. It's like it was trying to tell me something, and I just couldn't ignore it.
3 years later, Michael started FLAP and went looking for solutions. He didn't know it at the time, but someone else was on the same mission, on this quiet campus in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
All right, let me show you a few of our specimens that we've been able to collect locally here.
Ornithologist Daniel Clem was keeping even more detailed records of bird deaths.
Treatment 1, please.
Clem was convinced that bird-safe glass was the answer. Windows with markers that birds can see and avoid. He was field testing all kinds of different patterns. Here's one called fritting. From a few feet away, the human eye doesn't see the dots, but birds do.
This particular glass in the corridor here with the dots on it has killed no birds. We've had no records of any strikes, but about a dozen birds within a year's period of time have died at the other conventional windows. It's sort of a natural experiment.
Clem says it's worth the extra cost when you consider the staggering North American death toll.
We're talking maybe 1 billion birds a year.
1 billion birds a year. By comparison, one of history's worst oil spills, the Exxon Valdez, killed fewer than 500,000 seabirds. Those images of dead birds were in the news day after day, yet we hear almost nothing about the casualties of window strikes. Species big and small, from the hummingbird to larger birds of prey.
Oh, this one here is a merlin that was killed at a local residence, and it still has a feather in its mouth of the bird that it caught before it flew right into the window.
It's a problem most of us aren't aware of since we so rarely see birds hitting glass. Here's an exception. A bald eagle flying into a skybox at an American college football game. And in Scarborough, Ontario, a female red-tailed hawk was photographed flying into an office tower. That and other bird strikes prompted the building to install protective markers. Bird advocates have won an even bigger round in the battle with buildings. Toronto now requires all new buildings to have bird-safe glass. It's become a worldwide model.
Toronto, to me, is the linchpin in getting our attention and education at a level that would stimulate constructive action.
We now are seeing guidelines that first originated here in Toronto appear in Calgary, the city of Vancouver, the city of Markham. We have Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Paul, San Francisco, New York City. They're all starting to adopt similar processes in their city.
It's a job that will take decades, since only new buildings have to have bird-friendly windows. Up against a wall of glass and steel, the birds might seem overwhelmed and outmatched.
Now this guy is going to want to gravitate toward open water and shoreline, so we're going to cross the road here.
But Michael Mesure is making a difference, one rescued bird at a time.
I'm going to hopefully direct him in this direction here so he doesn't go out over open water.
That injured Virginia rail we saw earlier, Michael sets him back on the path to migration.
It's going to happen very quickly. There he goes. It tugs at your heartstrings, plain and simple. It tugs at your heartstrings to know that these creatures, they don't have a voice. And really, we are their voice. We're their only voice.
Coming up next week on 16 by 9, a Remembrance Day special, including the story of a Dutch woman who risked her own safety to hide a Jewish family from the Nazis. Now, after decades apart, the emotional reunion.
From where we lived, you could see that glow in the sky, and the day right after that, the Germans marched in. What do you want? We have to search your house. You cannot possibly live and be scared all the time.
The memory, it was so terrible, so terrible, so terrible. We went out the back door.
It was full of Germans there, but we had to go past it. We had to.
We hope you'll join us for that Remembrance Day special next week on 16 by 9. In the meantime, that is our broadcast for tonight. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. From all of us here at 16 by 9, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.